My name is David Barry from Jewish Online Magazine, and welcome to Jewish Online Magazine's Jewish Newspaper Review. And I've got two special panellists with me. On my left, I have Carol Gould. Welcome to Jewish Online Magazine.
Thank you.
Carol is an American broadcaster. And on my right, we have Jeff Flashman. Welcome to Jewish Online Magazine.
Thank you.
And Jeff is a ZF spokesman.
One of the things that struck me is the story about the chief rabbi being interviewed by David Frost and the 2,000 people booking seats. And what I found interesting in this piece, it's on page 3 of the JC, is David Frost asked the question that every Jewish person gets asked at every dinner party with non-Jewish people, is why did only 13 Jews die and 1,300 Palestinians when there was the most recent conflict? And I often turn around and just say, well, why would you like more Jews to die? Just, get a machine gun and go out and just shoot Jews in Golders Green. And then, I wouldn't do a thing like that. But actually, it's interesting what Sachs's answer was. He kind of beat around the bush. He said, oh, I don't like these, this kind of moral equivalence. But what he didn't say is what I always say when I'm on Arab television, Iranian, or whatever non-Jewish television station I'm on, even Sky, is Israel has had the best civil defense for infrastructure of any country in the world, including the U.S., for 64 years. In the U.S., they were all running around buying gas masks. Where can we get a gas mask after 9/11? But Israel protects its citizens. And one of the reasons why I say this to people is so many people die when there is a conflict is because these surrounding countries do nothing to protect their civilians. And we also know that Hezbollah has been known to put civilians into buildings. And then afterwards, Robert Fisk on the front page of the Independent the next day, the brutal Israelis massacring Arabs, Palestinians. And it isn't, I'm surprised that Sachs didn't say that, because it isn't the issue. The issue is civil defense, as I put in big capital letters here.
And Jeff, from the Jewish News, just carrying on this David Frost Chief Rabbi event last week, headlines on the Jewish News, gay Jews have been shunned.
Yeah, well, it's always a touchy subject when we start talking about these issues. And the thing that struck me actually was the comments a bit later on by Benjamin Cohen. He's a publisher of Pink News. He says the idea that he being the chief rabbi, does not seek to impose his views on society, doesn't tally with his opposition to gay marriage. It'll be interesting to see how he votes when he reaches the House of Lords in 2 weeks. And I just thought that that those who are not gay have to respect those who are, but it seems the reverse sometimes isn't always true.
What do you think, Carol? Chief Rabbi attacks intolerance towards homosexuals.
I'll tell you something, that in the past month or so, when gay marriage has been the top story on the British news cycle, except for Alex Ferguson retiring and David Beckham retiring, a lot of my friends who are gay and who hold very high positions and extremely important jobs, it's an interesting view that they take. We really don't want to hear about us.
Yes.
Can this please just be kept on low profile? I don't want to marry my partner.
Yes.
I don't want it to be in Parliament. I don't know what is obsessing David Cameron, unless it's Nick Clegg putting pressure on him from the Liberal side. And it's interesting that many friends of mine who ascribe to being homosexual are fed up. They're embarrassed. They almost feel there could be a backlash, that if it's taken too far, right-wing, the fascist elements will be beating up gay people in the street.
Yes.
And that's an interesting element of this.
But is it not the gay people pushing this, though, to make this front line? Well, yeah. So, but is he not responding to pressure from beneath?
I don't see anything. I've been reading a lot about this issue.
Carol, my personal opinion, and I've discussed this with my wife before, is what people do in their bedroom, in their own privacy, is their own cheshbon, and you know, for it to be put into the public domain all the time, I agree with you, Carol. I mean, listen, what people do in their bedroom is their own business, and there is their own cheshbon, and that's fine, and I think we should leave it like that. Carol, on Sunday, we've got the Closer to Israel parade.
Oh, yes.
It's the back of the Jewish News, celebrating Israel's 65th birthday. What, are you looking forward to Sunday? Will you be going?
Oh, I'm going to make a point of going. I hope they have good security. Whenever these things happen, I always worry, particularly in light of the killing of the British soldier in Woolwich. I hope that there isn't some sort of demonstration by these peculiar extreme right groups who, although they rant and rave about Muslims, a lot of them are also very anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. So I hope the security will be good. I've no doubt it will. And I'm looking forward to it. Let's just hope it isn't minus 12 degrees.
Yes, Jeff, and obviously, speaking on behalf of the ZF, a big event on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, the ZF are one of some 45 groups that are going to be going, and we're looking forward to that. We're going to be part of a parade, which starts around midday. And
what do you think the objective is on Sunday? What's the objective,
I think
Jeff?
the objective is to raise the profile of how amazing this state of Israel is, and what it's done in 65 years is incredible. There's no other country like Israel. There's no other country that can turn a land that was swampland and desert into a desert that blooms.
Just carrying on about Israel, just moving on a little bit. On page 8 of the JC, just how far will flights cost fall? Because we know travelling to Israel is quite expensive. I mean, if you don't book in advance, you're talking what, £300, £400, £500 minimum, aren't you? And it will be a delight if it can now become affordable. Jeff?
Well, obviously, we travel to Israel quite a bit, and it would be great to see more airlines coming in. And I think it's because of government restrictions that it hasn't happened before. But these restrictions are coming down now, and it's going to give an opportunity for Israel to be more on par with other destinations.
However, if the extra security needed by Israeli Airlines or by British Airways flying to Israel raises the price a little bit, I'm happy to pay a little bit extra.
But you expect that?
Yeah, because the security going to Israel and coming out of Israel is bar none. It's the best in the world. Touch wood, thank God.
Do you have another story, Carol, you want to talk to us about?
I was infuriated, having had breast cancer twice and being Ashkenazi Jewish, that the British media, in the whole fortnight of the Angelina Jolie story... This
is from the Jewish News, is it?
The Jewish News, page 3. Cancer gene test will help with the that the mainstream British media never mentioned that the BRCA gene is primarily amongst Ashkenazi Jews and mostly among women. And Professor Michael Baum, the breast cancer surgeon, who wrote a wonderful book called Breast Beating, wrote all about the BRCA gene. And the fact that the reason why it's prevalent amongst Ashkenazi Jews is that Ashkenazis marry Ashkenazis, Sephardi marry Sephardi. No one quite knows why in Sephardi Jews the incidence of cancer is so much less. But Ashkenazi Jews, Jewish women, Ashkenazi, are up there.
Yes.
And the rest of the world is down here for breast cancer and ovarian cancer. My nurse at the hospital told me that, she said, my ladies at Northwick Park, they're all young ladies, and she said 70% of them are Jewish, 70% of them are under 40, and they're having to have ovarectomies. They may not have a child because they have breast and ovarian cancer.
Story,
but it was not stressed at all in the British media, and all these young women are going to be running to have blood tests who are not really genetically, they don't have a proclivity.
Yes.
But I mentioned this at an NHS conference I went to last week to a prominent London doctor in front of a whole load of people, and he got very nervous and he said, in the NHS we don't specify ethnic groups, we don't pick somebody out. I said, no, that's not the point I'm making. It's that Jewish women in the States routinely are offered the BRCA test.
Okay. Jeff, Page 7 of the Jewish News, a quote from Lapid, no compromise on future of Jerusalem. Should he be putting forward this kind of comment, in the news? Because is that the way forward, Jeff?
I mean, I think that it's fairly well known that the mainstream parties in Israel are not going to give up the rights to Jerusalem. And so why not state it? I mean, if you want to ask me personally, then of course I'm in support of not giving up.
But
Jerusalem.
Negotiations haven't started, Jeff,
True.
have they? So why come up with the comment, no compromise on future Jerusalem?
Well, I think that there are certain ground rules that are being laid by the Palestinians, and as such, maybe that encourages Mr. Lapid to also come out with a few ground rules as well. I mean, there's going to have to be serious compromise to get peace. And who knows what will happen with Jerusalem. But he's laying out his stall. As far as the Jew is concerned, Jerusalem is untouchable. But if in negotiations something happens, then that would be amazing.
Is the way forward, Carol, to share Jerusalem, to split Jerusalem in half? What do you think?
Whenever I've been in Jerusalem, I've always felt that it's a city that is open to Christians, Jews, Muslims, Baha'i. The beautiful thing about Jerusalem since the 67 war is how it has been so beautifully restored, maintained. And I think that, look, 50 years from now, we won't be here. And I'm sorry to say, I think there's still going to be a dispute. Because when I am on Iranian or Arab television, it is hard to describe the absolute fury that all of those countries whose representatives go on these programs feel about Jews being in Palestine at all.
Cool. Which is the problem in the end,
that's
isn't it?
right. When you look at Mahmoud Abbas, and I know a lot of people still think he's a, quote, a terrorist, he's very moderate compared to some of the people that I've been up against. But I think in the end, in my view, it could even be an international city. And I know that Israel wants it to be its capital. I can't bear it when British TV and media refer to... A law has just been passed from Tel Aviv because they refuse to refer to the Knesset being in Jerusalem. Tel Aviv says, it drives me mad, but eventually I have this feeling it's going to be an international city. Israel may not get its great wish.
Okay, so
might be the compromise.
Page 7 of the Jewish Chronicle. Arab students aided by pairs £100,000 grant. A nice story to follow on from a Lapid statement.
When we were, I have to say this because you brought up something here where Israel is not so terrible to the Arabs. They do a lot of good things there. When my wife and I were in Jerusalem just a few weeks ago, we walked around by the Mount of Olives. It's an Arab area. We felt perfectly safe. I mean, the hype that's on the TV and on the media about what goes on in Israel is just not true. Israel, generally speaking, is a great place to be, and you don't feel a threat. We're in an Arab area. Now, of course, there are little areas that sometimes come where there are problems, but generally speaking, the Arabs who live there, if something happens and in the end that becomes a Palestinian territory, they don't want to live under Palestinian rule. They want to live under Israeli rule because they're not stupid.
but Carol, this is a great story, isn't it? Do you think
it is.
Arab students aided by pairs, £100,000 grant?
Yes, it is. But if you tell this to people who are particularly anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, say just in a social situation in one's London circle, yes, but that doesn't make any excuse for all the massacres and all the apartheid, and this word apartheid that everybody uses in Israel, and the apartheid wall. And I say, yes, but I can't imagine Saudi Arabia or Yemen giving scholarships to Jewish students.
Yes,
exactly. And then you couldn't even go into those countries. Certainly you wouldn't be able to sit and daven if you wanted to in Yemen or Saudi Arabia or any of these Muslim countries.
So I was just thinking, if you wouldn't mind, as a ZF spokesman,
sure,
I'd like to pull out one thing, which is on page 10 of the Jewish News.
The Jewish News?
Yeah, page 10. It's a letter. It's a letter from Mr. William Bell from Christian Aid. He's a Christian Aid advocacy officer. And he says that refers to a headline in an article on March the 29th, which may have confused readers as to what Christian Aid's policy on the boycott of Israeli goods actually is. As the article goes on to state, Christian Aid does not and has never called for a boycott of Israeli goods. What we have called for is a ban on the importation of Israeli settlement produce. This is because, and this is the mantra we're always hearing, settlements are contrary to international law, they're obstacles to peace, and they're obstacles to Palestinian economic development. And as an advocate for Israel, I have to say that I just cannot agree with any of those statements. And we have to put our side to these things, and we have to combat this kind of rhetoric, which is just simply not true. And firstly, with regard to international law, Israel will vehemently deny that it's contrary to international law. Yeah. Yeah. And they created the Levy report last year, which clearly states that it's not. Obstacle to peace. Well, you know, Israel back in 2009, I think it was, had a 10-month freeze on settlements in Israel. Didn't bring them back to the table at all.
Sure, and Sharon evacuated the Jews from Gaza ever since it's become a war hub.
And Palestinian economic development. I always smile when they throw this one out, because there are literally thousands of Palestinians working in the settlements. And so if they're trying to ban goods from the settlements, they're actually going to affect the Palestinians themselves. And I just cannot live with this type of rhetoric without combating it.
It goes on and on. It's like the movie Groundhog Day. It's Plus Sachan. Because in my book that I wrote in 2008, that was published in 2009, I have a chapter about being an American living in Britain and constantly having to defend Israel. And I went into a shop, this is in my book, near me in Maida Vale, an organic shop, and I said, oh, corn on the cob, because Americans love corn on the cob. Oh, doesn't it look nice? It's from Israel. So I take it up to the till, and the young lady on the till says, you can't buy that. That slipped through the net. And I said, what do you mean? It's from Palestine. I said, oh, it's from Israel. She said, it's from the apartheid state. I said, where do you pick up this information? I said, you can't be more than 20. She said, I read The Independent, I read The Guardian. I said, oh. I said, well, it's not an apartheid state because there are over 1 million Muslims living inside Israel. They have their own madrasas, they have their own schools, they have their own mosques, they have shops. Really? Yeah. And she actually, after I spoke to her for a while, because she's indoctrinated by the unprecedented distortions.
How would you address on Sunday, Jeff, at this Closer to Israel, if somebody comes up to you and said, Israel is an apartheid state, how do you respond to that?
I mean, the response is, how can it be? Firstly, there are Arab members of the Knesset. There's Arab professors in universities. There's Arab doctors. The Arabs have freedom within the country. So it cannot. I mean, if you say to a South African that Israel is an apartheid state, they bite your head off because they know what apartheid really means. Yes. So it's a disgrace, actually, that it's ever been linked to apartheid. It's just not true.
When I first came to this country in 1976, I was 22, and my mother said, first thing you must do, you've never been to Israel, go into a bookstore, get a book about Israel. It's close, it's a 4.5-hour flight, go to Israel for a visit. So I go into his bookstore in Charing Cross Road, and the very hostile young man said, books about Israel? And I said, yes. He said, it's over there in the category of occupied Palestine. And I'll bet you 36 years later, it's still occupied Palestine.
Do you have another story, Carol?
Yes, I thought it was interesting. The UK,
this is on the Jewish Chronicle,
page 5 of the Jewish Chronicle, UK calls for EU to ban Hezbollah. What I find interesting about the timing of this is that really a day after this issue of the JC came out, we heard over this past weekend that Hezbollah has declared its ongoing support for President Assad.
Sure.
And it kind of all fits together into a puzzle that Hezbollah, Assad, together, it's kind of strange bedfellows, I think, but They've always been funding Hezbollah in Lebanon, as far as we know.
It's coming through
Or
from Iran, of course.
was it Senator John McCain? It was one of the Republicans who said in the presidential campaign a few years ago that if you walk into Damascus, there's a shop like we would have in Philadelphia. We'd have a coffee shop. There's a shop to join Hezbollah. Whether he's right or not, I don't know. But I thought that it was interesting. The calling on the EU to ban Hezbollah.
But interestingly, that Britain's call is to ban their military wing. Well, I mean, Nasrallah himself has said there's no difference between their political and military wing. They're one.
Yeah.
So you've got to ban them completely. You can't just ban one and not the other. I mean, it's not the IRA here.
And Nasrallah said the other day, we want to fight against Israel, the US, Europe, and Al-Qaeda, who are all fighting together against President Assad. And I thought, wow, now we've really got some strange bedfellows. But it is rather worrying. The situation in Syria is extraordinary how the media still spend so much time condemning Israel.
Yeah, they've left Israel.
And when I argue with my left-wing friends, they say, stop with the moral equivalency. It's apples and oranges. Israel is still committing atrocities. It's still massacring people. It's still apartheid. It's nothing to do with Syria. I said, since when is Netanyahu or any leader of Israel murdering its own people? Oh, it's nothing to do with it. They're murdering Palestinians. So
Crazy.
it's Groundhog Day.
No, I've got something just to give us a laugh. Now, this is you've either got to laugh or cry.
Okay, go on, Jeff.
So, but this is an
the Jewish News, is it?
piece by Jeremy Havardi on the Jewish News, page 11.
Okay.
And by rewarding terror, the United Nations has no real purpose. How Iran's leaders must be chuckling. I mean, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? Their country has been appointed to chair the UN-sponsored conference on disarmament, established to broker agreements on arms control. And I've just got to throw in what Hillel Neuer said, which is brilliant. He said it's akin to putting Jack the Ripper in charge of a woman's shelter. I mean, where are the UN's brains? Well, maybe they don't have any. Nonsense.
I remember Donald Rumsfeld, when he was Secretary of Defense of the United States, said he'd have a press conference, and he'd say, before we say anything, he said, I can't believe this. This week the United Nations has appointed, and he'd named some horrific country with massive human rights violations. They're chairing the Human Rights Committee this month. Or they're chairing the disarmament committee this month. That was 10 years ago. So again,
they're still doing it. I think Venezuela are on the Human Rights Committee at the moment. They were appointed this year. Yeah. They're great supporters, of course, of Assad in Syria and supporters of Libya and stuff. So
yes.
I mean, I think actually the point that Jeremy makes is actually quite good. How do you undermine the authority of the UN? And he says, I've got to look. Oh, yes, his way is to ridicule them, which is one way to do it. I think also to hold them accountable is another way to do it, and we need to be holding them accountable. Really.
But one thing I miss about the Jewish News over the past 2 months is Charlie Wolf. One of my favourite columnists. I have to declare an interest that Charlie and I also appeared together on. We've known each other for many years. I may not agree with him on everything, but I do. He always has some very interesting comments in the paper because he's American. But I don't know what's happened. But there is this column by Rabbi Shulamit Ambalu. She is the rabbi of Milton Keynes District Reform Synagogue. And the reason why I picked it out is I couldn't quite understand what she was moaning about, because she says she's on page 22. So she should be on page 22, not stranded here on page 13. Most journalists, the lower the number, the more important you are. But I couldn't quite understand what she was complaining about. It was one of these columns where you think, what's the point? But I think what she's saying is that the Reform and the Liberal don't get as big a voice in Jewish media as the Orthodox. Yeah. I actually think that the JC, this is the Jewish News, is fair. I think it's pretty much half and half.
I think they do. And Just going on the sports pages for a moment.
Yes.
Sports.
Yeah.
I covered sports.
That's
I'm happy
my-
to.
Yeah.
Favourite subject.
going on?
Well, you know, Israel is hosting the under
under
21
yes.
European
That's a very
Championship.
important story.
And it's a very important story.
story.
And but unfortunately, some countries don't want Israel to host the European Championships.
I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? There was bound to be, but you have to say well done to UEFA for sticking to their guns.
Yes. What do you think, Carol?
When does it start?
In June.
Right, because
It's a big hats off to UEFA, I think, isn't
yeah.
it? Jeff?
Sorry,
A big
Yeah.
hats off to UEFA.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
for them for sticking. You know, they don't want to mix politics and sport, and they've stuck to it, and
Carol?
good for them.
I've been upset by the fact that there have been protests, demonstrations, letters, organisations writing to UEFA pleading with them to cancel it. I'm a little bit worried about something that might happen there. But Israel, we know Israel has absolutely superb security, so we just have to hope it'll go. If it goes ahead without a hitch, and it's great for these young people, then it's worth all the bad PR and good PR in the world.
Yeah, no, it's a chance for Israel to shine even more.
No, absolutely. And,
Remember when England went to play in Israel, and Rio Ferdinand absolutely fell in love with the country, and I think he's been back a few times. And several England players who had been brainwashed just thought this is the most amazing place.
And also there's the Maccabiah games as well. So it's a big sporting summer for Israel, isn't it?
And the
Yeah,
other
that's
thing
it.
I say to people who rant at me about Israel, because it's the only country in the world when I am out socially, that people are constantly on at me about Israel. It doesn't happen in the States. But there was an interesting little editorial about, I think it was in the JC, it was one of those sort of semi-humorous ones about hitchhiking in Israel.
Right.
What country in the world can you hitchhike to work every day and nothing happens to you?
Yes, I must admit, I've done some hitchhiking in my times in Israel. And,
As a woman, I have walked down the street in Tel Aviv. There is crime in Israel,
Yes,
but I've walked
sure.
down the street on a very hot night when I can't sleep, 2:30 in the morning.
Yes.
The worst that can happen is some soldier will walk on and say, "Gewehret, be careful where you're walking." But other than that, there's so many wonderful things, as you said before, about Israel that people just don't know about. All they see are soldiers beating up Palestinians, and actually that is not
Which not
the
what
daily
happens,
event.
which is not,
No.
that's not what happens
No.
anyway. So
No.
there was that famous story, it must be 10 years ago, of the picture of an Israeli soldier beating up a Palestinian boy,
Yes.
and that boy turned out to be a
Yes.
Jewish kid from New York or
Yes,
somewhere,
yes,
and
yes.
the policeman was saving him from the Palestinians, and it's just how the media twist everything
Yes.
to try and get across some narrative that's just totally
That's
untrue.
right, and as Melanie Phillips has pointed out in the JC this week, and on her website, the Mohammed Al-Dura case, which is now 11 years old.
13
It's
actually,
too little too late, because it's beginning to be apparent that it was staged, and that it's possible that the boy didn't die, that he was seen in the neighborhood later in the day. So it's another case of the media twisting things to make it always look as if Israel is in the wrong.
Although I think in this case, I think Israel should have done better. I mean, Melanie says at the end of the article that something like Israel, why wait 13 years to come out with a report? And of course Israel had originally admitted it and then backtracked. But they shouldn't have left it go so long, because I think she said herself in 2007 she saw the video and she saw where the child moved at the end of the video after he'd been pronounced dead by this guy Ender whatever his name is, this French guy who wasn't even there. He was in Ramallah. So
Right. Philippe Carcenti,
yes,
a Frenchman, has been pursuing this, not an Israeli.
yeah,
So
well,
it takes a Frenchman to bring this to he's been tirelessly fighting about this for years. But you're quite right, Israel didn't put enough energy into it right from the beginning.
They should have done a bit
Yeah.
more. But I think they wanted to try and sweep it under the carpet. But but it's clear that it couldn't have been Israeli shoulders.
Yeah.
But you know, that caused an intifada, or that fueled an intifada that ended up with many Israelis being murdered because of it. And the press are responsible.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, Palestinians are going to try and make propaganda, and it's up to the British press or the European press to vet it, to make sure it's real, to make sure it's true before they air it.
Well, I thought of something this week when we saw those terrible images of the alleged murderer of Lee Rigby in Woolwich. I'm sure you know what I'm going to say. Yeah. The guy with the... Immediately I thought of Ramallah, October 12, 2000, when the 2 Israeli reservists were brutally chopped up because they'd wandered into the wrong neighbourhood in Ramallah, and immediately I thought of that.
I think just perhaps before we close, Carol and Jeff, we'll perhaps make something a bit more light-hearted, I think. Last Sunday was the Community Fun Run, hosted by Maccabi GB, and there was over 2,000 runners came together, raising money for good causes. I think 40 good causes, and enjoying keeping fit and running. And it was a great family event, and that was a great occasion last Sunday.
And Harrods is going to have kosher weddings.
Yes,
right?
yes.
The Queen Nefertiti design.
Yes. So. And actually, before we close, actually, guys, because it was Gefilte Fest maybe a week or 2 weeks ago.
David Miller Band.
And the best kosher restaurant was voted, I think, was Kai Fang. Have you got any? What's your favourite Jewish food or kosher restaurant, Jeff?
Favourite Jewish food? Well, it's got to be Lokshen soup with crepe. Look.
And Carol, what about you? Favourite restaurant or food?
Knishes, but you can't get them here. Cowboy in Kansas, take off his hat, come into a deli in Topeka, and say, "I'm dying for a liver knish." That culture has not permeated British society.
Okay. Jeff Flashman, Zionist spokesman, and Carol Gould, American broadcaster. Thanks ever so much for joining the Jewish Newspaper Review, and hopefully you'll be regular panelists when you can make it. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.